Schools are supposed to be safe havens for learning, but sometimes, behind their closed doors, the most terrifying lessons are taught. I found 3 stories that prove just that. Story 1. It was a typical, boring Friday in 7th period calculus. The week was almost over, and with spring break just around the corner, everyone was practically vibrating in their seats with anticipation. We didn't have a test scheduled, so our teacher, who was famously laid back, decided to kill time by playing some trivia games with us on sporkle.com. We were in the middle of a Guess the Corporate Logo quiz. I remember the exact moment it happened. Just after my friend shouted out the correct answer, Adidas. The calm was shattered by the crackle of the school's intercom system. The dean's voice came through, not in its usual monotone but tight with panic and urgency. He was almost shouting as he told all the teachers, "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Go into lockdown now." A cold chill ran down my spine. Even our normally unflappable teacher's face went pale. He scrambled to his feet, flicked off the lights, and frantically ushered us to the back corner of the classroom. We huddled together in absolute silence for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 2 minutes. Then, the low, constant hum from an electrical panel in the back of the room suddenly went silent, a clear sign that the school had cut all power. We exchanged wide-eyed, terrified glances, the reality of the situation sinking in. A few more agonizing minutes passed. Then we heard it, a man screaming at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing down the hallway. The stifled sobs of 2 girls near the front cut through the silence, and a fresh wave of fear washed over us. As the unhinged screaming grew closer, it was punctuated by the violent sound of him banging on the metal lockers, one after another, all while yelling, "I'll kill all of you." It was at that moment I truly started to fear for my life. The terrifying rhythm of banging then moved from the lockers to our classroom door. It was a heavy, frantic pounding. One of the crying girls let out a sharp scream. The banging on our door only grew more violent as the man roared, "Open up!" He pounded on that door for what felt like a lifetime. But eventually, the sounds grew more distant as he continued his rampage down the hallway, his crazed screaming fading until we could no longer hear him. About 10 minutes later, the dean's voice returned to the intercom. He explained that a mentally unstable individual had forced his way into the building and assaulted the woman at the front desk, who had managed to escape. The staff was unsure if the man was armed. This was years ago, before the school had proper security cameras. A sweep of the main hallways had come up empty. But the story has a chilling postscript. According to the rumors that circulated for weeks, one of the janitors on the night shift found the man fast asleep in a storage closet at the far end of the school, and sticking out of his pocket, plain as day, was a .44 Magnum. To this day, we never found out if that man was ever formally identified or captured. Story 2. At my middle school, lunch was a split affair. First lunch was for the 6th graders, and the second was for the rest of us in 7th and 8th grade. This lockdown happened on a gloomy, rainy day in early October. I was in the cafeteria during the first lunch period, when 4 loud, concussive booms echoed from outside. Boom, 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 boom. My first thought was thunder, but the immediate panicked screaming that erupted across the cafeteria told me I was wrong. I figured the younger kids were just overreacting, but then campus security officers stormed in, yelling for everyone to get into the adjoining multi-purpose room. My friend Leo and I shuffled in with the massive crowd of kids. The air was thick with confusion and fear. Our multi-purpose room is massive, with a whole back wall made of see-through glass. We watched as security personnel rushed to draw the heavy curtains across it, blocking the view. Leo, ever the curious one, managed to ask one of the adults what was happening. He came back to me, his eyes wide. "You know those houses across the street?" he whispered. "Some guy who lives there has barricaded himself inside. He's threatening to kill himself and shoot any cops who come near. Apparently he was seen walking around outside the school just watching the kids, acting really weird." The situation got even scarier. It turned out the man was a registered sex offender. We were all held in that multi-purpose room for a full, tense hour, which felt like 2 entire class periods. The story didn't end there. I found out later that the man lived right next door to another friend of mine, Brandy. On the previous Halloween, she had seen that same man standing in his own window, deliberately cutting his arm and using his own blood to write a message on the glass. "Don't come here or I'll kill you." At the time, everyone, including Brandy, dismissed it as a gruesome, over-the-top Halloween decoration. Story 3. I'm 22 years old. Fresh out of college, I landed a gig that felt like a step back in time. A computer intern in the basement of my old high school. The basement itself is a disorganized mess. But my job was based in a surprisingly cushy 3-person office tucked away down there. It was a small sanctuary with nice desks and, most importantly, powerful air conditioning. A luxury nobody upstairs had. My 2 co-workers, Mark and Kevin, were upstairs dealing with paperwork at the time. I was in the middle of my lunch break, eating a sandwich, when my phone rang. It was one of the women from the front office. Her voice was a frantic whisper, telling me the school was on lockdown. Someone, possibly armed, was inside the building. Down in my isolated office, there wasn't much I could do. The office, for all its comforts, didn't have a proper door, just a wide-open entryway, and the main door to the entire basement, the lock on it was broken. My only course of action for safety was to kill the lights and shut off my monitor. So there I sat, in the pitch black, passing the time by silently playing games on my phone. 20 minutes crawled by. I was completely cut off, unable to hear any of the chaos from upstairs, just waiting for the all-clear call. Then, the notoriously noisy basement door let out a long, slow creak as it opened. The sound echoed through the cavernous space and seemed to slither right into my office. I froze, every muscle tensed. Should I call out for Mark or Kevin? Before I could decide, I heard footsteps. Someone was running down the stairs, their steps heavy and fast. They were heading directly for my office. In a surge of pure panic, I shoved my chair back and scrambled under my desk, trying to make myself as small as possible. A figure entered the office, but the lights stayed off, and then there was just silence. I can't even begin to describe the absolute terror of that moment. I was convinced that if I made a single sound, I'd be a dead man. The silence was broken by the sharp ding of a text message on my phone, which I'd left on the desk. My heart leapt into my throat. The footsteps moved again, directly toward me. I couldn't take it anymore. I dove out from under the desk in complete surrender, my hands up, begging, "Don't kill me, please don't kill me." Just then, a hand grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. I saw a man in a red plaid button-up shirt, jeans, and a reddish-black cap. "It's okay," he said, his voice low. "I'm just down here hiding with you." "What's happening up there?" I managed to whisper. He seemed to ignore my question, instead asking, "Is there an exit down here?" I pointed vaguely. "Yeah, that way." Before he moved, I asked, "Who are you?" He hesitated for a second, then explained he was a parent who had come to pick up his son, and a teacher had told him to hide in the basement. After he finished, I glanced at my phone. The text was from my old teacher, Dave. It read, "Dude, this is fucking crazy. Some guy with a gun shot Mr. Davis. He's wearing a red shirt and hat. Whatever you do, don't come upstairs." I was about to read the message aloud to the stranger, and then it hit me. The red shirt, the hat. My blood ran cold. I looked up at him and my stomach sank. He must have seen the dawning horror in my eyes. Panicking, the only thing I could think to do was run. I bolted for the stairs. A gunshot exploded through the basement. I heard the zing of the bullet ricocheting off something metal in the dark. But thank God, It missed me. I scrambled up the stairs and burst through the door. The police, thankfully, were waiting at every exit, including the one from the basement. They caught him the second he stepped out. The other piece of good news is that our teacher, Mr. Davis, survived. It was later determined that he and the shooter had some sort of personal conflict, though the details were never made public. All we know is that Mr. Davis was a good man who couldn't have done anything to deserve that. And I know, for the rest of my life, the sound of that gunshot will forever echo in my mind.